All set? Good evening and welcome to tonight's edition of The Chat. I'm Andy Tomalonis, Managing Editor for the New Bedford Light, and I've got the pleasure of introducing our guest panelists tonight. And this is a special one-on-one format with New Bedford Mayor Jon Mitchell. Also with us tonight is New Bedford Light columnist Jack Spillane, who will discuss some important issues throughout the city development, things that will have a significant economic impact on the city. So I'll let Jack continue here with the mayor, and I'm sure it'll be a great conversation.
Welcome, Mayor Mitchell. I've interviewed you many times, but we're really happy at the Light that you've agreed to spend this hour with us talking about these three big mega development projects that I think are as big as anything that I've seen development-wise in the 22 years I've been in New Bedford, and really have the possibility to change the city. First is the $27.3 million contract to expand the North Terminal for both wind and fishing industry use. Second is the Foss Marine Maritime of Seattle has entered a deal with Cannon Street Holdings for $13.6 million worth of marine development at the old Cannon Street Power Station, primarily for heavy wind turbine staging. And finally, the City Council is about to take up approval for the administration to take RFPs, requests for proposals for the sale of 100 acres of the Whaling City Golf Course for an industrial park. I think I have them right, Your Honor.
You do.
Okay.
Yep.
So let's get started. How
Sure.
did the North Terminal expansion project come about? We really haven't heard as much about that one until recently.
Right. So, yeah. So first off, thank you for having me, and thank you and Andy and the New Bedford Light for having me. It's a great forum to have these in-depth conversations about things that are really important to the city, but may not be entirely, covered by other media, and may not be, some may seem a little arcane or far afield for a lot of folks. But these are the things that we've worked hard on for a long time. The two harbor projects sort of fit into, a general approach to economic development. My view on the city has always been that New Bedford's a real city. It's not a satellite of Boston or New York or any other major metro. And it sits on its own bottom. It has its own suburbs. It has its own assets, its own vulnerabilities, and it's up to us ultimately, not folks at the state level, not federal level, or anybody else, to make our own way to become self-sustainable. We've got to compete, and you compete by doing well the things that you do well already. And by that I mean we do a lot of great stuff here. We were good at a lot of things: manufacturing, the arts. We've got a terrific industrial park, many other small businesses in between, small business corridors like Acushnet Avenue, Rivet Street. But in New Bedford, what stands out for us is what we do on the water. As we have America's largest commercial fishing port, the largest seafood cluster in America, the largest seafood processing base in America, in addition to being the fishing capital of the United States. And we do a lot else on the water, cargo and recreational boating, project cargo, a number of things. And now, offshore wind, which, we've pursued because we do all the other things on the water very well. It just makes sense for it to be here. We know we can take advantage of our geographic position, our infrastructure, our workforce, all the things that we do well in an industry that's bringing billions and billions of dollars over here to the United States. And so we've been, as you know, we've been trying to get ready for that for many years, and we work hard on it ultimately because we want to create opportunities for our residents. We want to continue to attract investment here and sustain the city. Cities that aren't invested in, that don't attract capital, end up dying in the long run. And we in New Bedford, fortunately, have cards to play, and that's what we're doing. So in the cases that you talked about, those two projects fit into the larger approach to the harbor. One of the big things that we have to do is make sure that all the industries that use the Port of New Bedford have infrastructure that is available and useful to them. And that requires a whole lot of investment. A lot of that investment, some of that investment comes from the city, but a whole lot of it has to come from other places, the state and federal government, the private sector. And so the question is, well, how do you do that? And the answer is, well, you got to have good plans in place. You have to be able to articulate to others why it makes sense to put funds into New Bedford. You have to have good relationships with folks, especially in state and in the federal government. And you have to be relentless about it, relentless about making your arguments. And that's what we've done. So, the announcements last week were really a manifestation of many years of hard work. I know we can pull up the screen, I think, so
Yeah,
we can
we
orient
pull that up.
people.
But I would like to ask, I have heard so little about this project. Was there an RFP? I don't remember a whole lot of talk. That may be indicative of the state of the media currently, but I just don't remember. I heard a lot of talk about the Cannon Street Power Plant project,
Right.
but not the North Terminal. When did this start coming into place?
Well, it's been discussed for a while, and unlike the Cannon Street property, it's less visible to the public after all, and the Eversource property is right there for everybody to see. The North Terminal property, just so people understand where it is, we'll show it on the map in a moment. But the North Terminal property or extension is part of a larger set of properties north of the bridge that are loosely referred to as the North Terminal area. And so if you're driving north from the bridge along on Herman Melville Boulevard, and you look to the right, you see all the fish houses off to the right, and you see the tallest one. That's the EPA terminal, which I'll mention in a moment too, because that's another big facility that we just got in our hands. And the North Terminal project extension, the North Terminal project we've been talking about, will be an extension northward from the EPA facility. So if we can zoom in right now, so you have the cursor right there, looking good. Sorry, stop right there. See that big white building right there? That is the facility that the Environmental Protection Agency has used for over 20 years as a dewatering facility for the cleanup of New Bedford Harbor. And it's, as the name implies, it's the place where water is removed from the contaminated sediments. And as you can see there are rail lines that go right up to the warehouse. The contaminated sediments were put on those rail lines, on rail cars on those lines, and they're shipped off to a landfill in Michigan. I say all this because it played an instrumental role in the cleanup of the harbor, but it was used primarily almost exclusively for the most contaminated sediments. Those most contaminated sediments have now been removed from the harbor. And so the need for this dewatering facility is no longer as pressing. So there's still cleanup to go, but it's for lesser contaminated sediments. So the Environmental Protection Agency last year, over the last couple of years, cleaned this whole place up and has turned the keys over to us. So this area here, I'm pointing, I don't have the control of the screen, but I'm pointing it to it myself here. That warehouse and the dock right there, all that bulkhead is now the city's, and that alone is a $50 million facility. 450 feet of bulkhead, right? A little over 400 feet of bulkhead right there. So that can be used for fishing, offshore wind, other projects. The warehouse can be used for a number of things. We've been storing stuff there. Of course, we had a vaccination clinic, but that is a big asset that was just added to the harbor.
Right now, this will extend out into the water. This will
this whole thing, where the cursor is right there, that whole area. So that's ours now as of a year ago. So we didn't have to pay for it. The federal government paid for it, and that's a big asset that's been added to our portfolio. So the project we're talking about now will take that bulkhead, right? When they talk about bulkhead, the bulkhead's a wall, right? That's the pier wall right there that runs along the water. So if you extended that up north from there, where those boats are, just pointing northward, put another 400 feet or so right around there, put another square right to about there, to that point. That's the project we're talking about. It's another marine facility. It extends that bulkhead wall another 450 feet. So that's roughly a $30 million project. That's something that we've been working on for a number of years. We took a few runs at some federal grants. On the third try, we got it. We're helped by Senator Markey, who put in a good word for us in his position on the Senate Transportation Committee. That was very useful in our efforts. And so we got the grant. The grant was for 15 million. State funds are also being used on the project in a sort
How
of
much, do you know?
roundabout way. And
Do
I'll
you
just
remember
discuss.
how much in terms of state funds?
So the state funds, it'll work out. It'll work out to be about the other half. So 15 from the federal government, right about just under 15 from the state. But the state funds. So here's how it works. So there's dredging going on in the harbor, and what's called berth dredging. So the dredging of the areas right next to the docks, so that ships can pull up. And that's going on up and down the harbor. And some of the material that's being dredged up is contaminated. That has to go into a CAD cell. There are CAD cells confined with CAD is confined aquatic disposal facility. And those they're basically holes in the bottom of the harbor where contaminated material goes and it's covered up. The CAD cell that's being used for the dredging project has to be dug up. That's clean material. That clean material will go into the back behind this wall right here. So it turns out it's a cheaper way to build a facility. So this is because we're using fill that material dirt that would have to be disposed of somewhere else anyway. So that gets filled back in. So you end up saving probably about at least $10 million on that project by doing these two things in combination, the dredging and the construction of the facility. So what this will allow us to do, I hope that's all clear to everybody. It's kind of hard, without sort of diagramming it out to make it crystal clear. But the bottom line is,
for those of you who may be driving down 140 someday, this is roughly right across from the rail yard, just northeast of the Whale's Tooth parking lot.
Yep. So there's the Whale's Tooth parking lot. So it's, a couple hundred yards north of that. So what this will allow us to do, it is creating more usable infrastructures that could be used by fishing, offshore wind, or some combination of the two. And we have to make room. We'll talk about this in a moment with Eversource. So New Bedford we are, for the first time in a long time, having to manage the problems associated with growth. New Bedford, the fishing industry on the East Coast of the United States, is in many ways consolidating in New Bedford. And the reason for that is, as we know, that there's a decline in a number of fish stocks on the East Coast. Lots of ports up and down the East Coast, including some here in Massachusetts, are struggling because there isn't enough throughput of fish now to keep up all the businesses in the harbor, right? So a lot of those boats come here. We have the infrastructure, we have the auction where fishermen can reliably get a reliable price on their fish. There's all the other businesses here to support what fishermen do here. So a lot of the boats, we get boats as far south as North Carolina now that land their scallops here. And that's become a common practice over the last 6 or 7 years. So that's why you see such a crowded harbor now. You add on top of that the fact that the offshore wind industry is coming, which is a massive industry in Europe. And all of a sudden it's coming here to the United States, and it's starting in New Bedford. Next year, when Vineyard Wind starts up, Vineyard Wind's during its deployment phase, when Vineyard Wind is building out that first wind farm, they estimate that they will have 46 vessel trips a day to build that wind farm. So you can imagine the traffic going back and forth of vessels of every type, large barges and smaller barges, smaller speedboats, all kinds of things, fishing boats, of course, going back and forth. And so those, all of them need space, all of them need docking space. Some of them will require anchorage spaces. So what we do, we want to capture all this business. We want to, we're greedy. We want it all, but we have to have infrastructure that allows for that. So that's why, we've been planning for this for a while. These projects don't get off the ground in a week or two. This takes years and years of planning. And so the work that we did 5 and 6 years ago to sort of think through all this stuff and then to pursue the money for it is falling into place now in time for, a lot of these market opportunities that are materializing now.
So Mayor Mitchell, I hope you won't mind me interrupting now and then because we have a lot of area to cover and
Yep.
an hour goes by fast, I found. So just to give people an idea of how big a project this is, the city's estimate is that it's supposed to bring 898 new jobs and $11.5 million in state revenue. Is this North Terminal supposed to be a place where the heavy bulk parts of the turbines are stored before they're shipped out, and as well as some new fishing boat berths? Is that basically the two big uses?
It's probably going to be some combination of fishing and offshore wind operations and maintenance, and not for lay down space for major components. The components of, as you know, of offshore wind windmills are gigantic, and people will see that firsthand starting next year, right on the waterfront. And that particular area is just not big enough for that to support that purpose. So what we'll see instead is smaller boats there that are doing a whole variety of activity out on the wind farms, as well as commercial fishing vessels pulling in there. And, we'll have to manage that facility as well as the EPA facility. So, yeah, but the EPA facility and the North Terminal combined will make, roughly 900 feet of bulkhead, big warehouse, a lot of great stuff going on there. And it's going to make us more competitive. The other thing I'll just say is this: our goals here, we're number one in fishing. We want to stay number one in fishing and empower our fishing industry to remain competitive and profitable. And we want to be number one in offshore wind too. That might sound ambitious, but it's doable, and we have to be determined. But we're getting there. But we know that there's this window of opportunity in the next, 3, 4, 5 years to capture industry investment, so it settles down here, and that's why we're working furiously to make these things happen now.
Now, this project was awarded to D.W. White, Construction of Acushnet, a well-known local company. Were there any other bidders for it?
Yeah, there were. I think there were 2 others. I think I know one of the 2, although I'm not even sure that I can disclose that. Although I probably could, but I'm not positive, so I don't want to do it if I'm.
Yeah, we'll do a public records request in the morning for that.
We'll look forward to that. Yeah, yeah.
So, is it a low bidder type project, or was it?
They were the low bidder. Yeah, they were the lowest bidder. Yep.
All right. Okay. And originally, was the replacement of the Fairhaven Bridge supposed to be envisioned as part of this development, or is that something entirely separate? I know there's been some reporters that there's been some frustration that we have all this infrastructure money coming this year and there's no plan for the Fairhaven Bridge.
Right. Unfortunately, it's not part of it. We've made a lot of progress on port infrastructure and dredging the port and planning and all that. The big thing that's just one of the big things, probably the single biggest thing that's been out of our reach, the piece that's been out of our reach, has been that bridge. And it's been reported in the last week. I mentioned to a few folks that I wrote a term paper for an urban economics class in college calling for the replacement of that bridge. And that was, at a time when, it was being discussed right around 1990 or so. And now fast forward 30 years and nothing's happened. Even though, if you might recall, Jack, there was in 2014, we got the state to do yet another feasibility study. We got them to do it because Barney Frank had put an earmark and an appropriations bill to do a feasibility study for that. Mass DOT never acted on it. We found out, like when I came into office, well, there's this earmark. How about doing this feasibility study that the federal government's already paid for, Mass DOT? And they finally grudgingly got to it. They did the study. It's 500 pages long. It's archived on their website, but they haven't acted on it.
3 different types of bridges they thought about building.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, 2 in general. 2 ones that's called the double bascule, which is one that opens up like this, and then there's a vertical lift bridge, kind of like the rail bridge down over the Cape Cod Canal. That may be the best one, but there are two big benefits to getting a new bridge, right? Three, right? It won't break down because it's new. Secondly, it will be the passageway that it'll open up for larger vessels. Right now, a vessel that larger vessels can't fit through because the passageway is 94 feet on each side, which is not long enough. We've got a vessel right now, a freighter at State Pier that's offloading right now that could not fit through that gap. So it stymies investment in the Northern Harbor. So that would be taken care of by having a bridge with a wider opening. And the last part is, as everybody knows, it would deal with the traffic jam. So it would have a higher clearance for boats, so it wouldn't have to open up for every little boat that comes through. And secondly, for the boats that have to come through, it open and close much faster than it does now. So
So how will being stuck with this bridge affect this new north terminal, if at all?
Well, I mean, it limits some of our options. It makes it harder for certain support vessels to get to the northern part of the harbor. It inhibits our ability to bring cargo to the northern part of the harbor using the cargo ships that call on New Bedford. Most of them are what are called refrigerated freighters, reefer ships. And yeah, they really can't fit north of the bridge. They stopped going there a few years ago because it was just too tight of a squeeze. So, what it does, the narrow passageway limits the options of folks who might invest in the northern part of the harbor.
Okay. So am I correct that because the planning hasn't been done, that we are probably too late for this round of this big infrastructure bill that Congress passed last year?
I hope not. I mean, we're certainly trying to push them. I asked if the secretary was that, even though they haven't budged on this thing, was just to move it into a design phase, right? Like do something, move it toward a design so it gets readier for funding from some source. And that has not happened yet. So we'll continue to push on that. But it's been frustrating because I think, as we've tried, our effort here is to modernize the port, and we're making a ton of headway on that front. It's just this one thing has not moved.
Yeah. Before we move on to the Foss Marine Terminal, is there anything else about the North Terminal that we should talk about that you think is important?
Well, I think, if we just go back to the map, I'll just touch very quickly on a couple of things. I think it's just useful to know, for people to know that there's a lot of other investment that's going on in that area. I don't know if we can it's possible to pull the map, the satellite map back up. Yeah, there we go. So just if you go all the way up to, you can see where 195 is, just to the north, right? So as you go down there, you've got investment in a lot of places. So you have Revere Copper and Brass, which was a huge site, right, that had been, vacant for over a decade. That is being privately developed by Charlie and Mike Quinn, and that's being turned into a shipyard, right? So they're putting millions of dollars into that property.
Mostly a repair shipyard, right? Less people think they're gonna be building ships in New Bedford.
Right. And mostly fishing boats, but not only fishing boats. They're probably going to be doing some work in the offshore wind industry as well. And then you go south to that sea trade, the building just to the south right there. That's undergoing a huge expansion. They, at long last, are now able, because of a change in Massachusetts law, to process lobster meat as well as scallops, and they are expanding. They've moved their headquarters from north of Boston here, and they've consolidated a lot of they're growing, they're adding more jobs. They're going to be building out the building just to the north. You can see the Sawtooth building right on North Front Street, just to the north. See all the building that runs along North Front Street right there. Yep, great looking building right on North Front Street. That is going to be turn into yet another fish processing plant, part of the sea trade complex. So that's happening now. Then you go just immediately to the south of sea trade, that little gully there. I see where that water is. So that is going to get filled in. That was another big federal grant that we got from the Economic Development Administration. So, we looked at a couple different things there. It could be for fishing. because it's so narrow and with not a lot of bulkhead there, you can only fit a few fishing vessels. So one of the things they're talking about is the possibility of island freight there, for which there is huge demand right now. So that's another possibility. And you go further south, that's Ralph Packer's facility. He does freight to the islands. And then you go further south and we have the two properties we just talked about, the North Terminal project and the EPA project. And then you go south from there, and there's investment going on at the Eastern Fisheries site as well as the other sites all along there. So a lot of happening, and that's just the northern part of the harbor. If you go over to Pope's Island and Fish Island, more investment going in there. Fish Island has their number of new docks going over there. Fairhaven Shipyard on Pope's Island. If you go over to Pope's Island to the right. Fairhaven Shipyard bought out the former Fairhaven hardware store. There's investment going in there. And then you have on the south side, Fleet Fisheries is expanding their marina. A lot happening. There's just, and that's just the northern, that's just the part of the harbor north of the bridge.
All right, so we're at about 7:30, about halfway in. So let's go to the Foss.
You got me on a subject that I like to talk about.
Okay. It's easy to expound, I guess, on something like this. So now the Foss Marine Terminal is the second terminal that, and correct me if I'm wrong, is designed. This one really is designed for the heavy components before they shipped out to the wind turbine sites, as well as the South Terminal, which the state built a few years ago. So why don't you point those out on the map? The South Terminal and the North.
Yep. So the Eversource, what's known as the Eversource site, is really there were two property owners. It was Eversource and it was Sprague Energy, which used those tanks. Sprague is a shipper of home heating oil and other oil, and they both owners sold their property to a local investment group headed up by Andrew Saunders. That deal just closed. It closed. Andrew was able to get his financing because he got an investment partner, and the investment partner is nominally Foss Marine, which is a subsidiary of Saltchuk Marine, which is a major marine construction and shipping company based out in Seattle. Great company, tremendous reputation on the West Coast, not much of a presence on the East Coast, so they're planting their East Coast flag right here. They want to be part of the offshore wind industry. They, like others, have seen the potential, and so they are planting their flag right here. They will take up, so this whole site's about 29 acres. Eversource kept a couple of acres over on the west side. You'll see there's a substation, just to the south, right? Right about there. That's that area. It was retained by Eversource, that and that little building just to the north there, right there, exactly. So Eversource held on to that part. That's like a little under 2 acres. The city, as part of the deal, we were also trying to pursue this property. The way the deal that we were entered into that will close in the next couple of months was that the city would retain another would get a 4 acres out of this, which would be in the northwest corner, as well as across the street at that pink building next to the hotel, just generally known as the gas building. So that would be for a number of different development possibilities.
I don't want to spend too much time, doing a tour because, people, have described most of these things in other stories. I would like to ask some questions about how it came about. And that is the Foss Terminal. That was a property that the city itself tried to get involved in when Eversource and Sprague were ready to sell it. The city, was interested in that. And then you worked out a deal with Mr. Saunders. Tell me about how that deal came about.
So we pursued it, and I think the upshot of it is that we pursued it because I think I believe in public ownership of port facilities, public ownership with private operation, right? And that's the model most major ports around the country operate under, right? So and so we saw this as an opportunity, to acquire an enormously important and available site. The reality is that we had a tough time pulling all that money together. This was before we got ARPA funds and before, like in the middle of the pandemic, but before we got ARPA funds.
How would you ever have paid for it?
ARPA funds. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Yeah. I mean,
I mean, I don't know if you knew the pandemic was coming along.
well, I mean, there are a couple of things. So it would have been a combination of funds from the state as well as are selling certain parts of it to private property owners on the other side. So it would have been a fairly complex transaction. What Andrew did was more straightforward, which is to acquire it. We're getting part of the reason why we, the city, have gotten part of it is that it has to do with some of the statutory obligations that Eversource as a public utility operates under. When they sell property, they are supposed to demonstrate to the state's Division of Public Utilities that there are certain community benefits to the disposition of their property, right? They sell something and it can't just be for a profit, right? They have a double bottom line. They also have to ensure that they also have to provide in some way for the public good. And so the way that worked out in practice here is that Andrew, knowing this, understood that, you know, the city's interest in the property. And so the deal was, well, okay, the city will get a part of it, the part that he didn't need as much, but we really wanted for a grand total of $1, which is a pretty good deal for the city. And so,
Well, Andrew's a nice guy, but how did you convince him to give you those 4 acres for $1? I mean,
Eversource believed it could not convince the DPU to sell it to him, to sell it to the highest bidder, period. That they had to discharge their obligation to provide for community benefits. This is something that we were aware of, and that was the deal that we struck. I think it's a good one for him. I think it's a good one for the city as well.
So originally you were talking about things like a maritime conference center, a load off fish facility that would also be a retail facility, some office space. Is that what the city is still thinking of doing with its 4 acres?
Yeah, so we don't own any of the property right on the water. One of his partners, one of Andrew's partners, is John Lees, who's one of the larger owners of fish processing owners on the waterfront and scalloper owners, and so he is interested in doing a fish offloading site there. We've expressed him, we'd like to see that be something that would be publicly accessible so people could actually watch fishing boats being unloaded. I think that'd be a good thing for the fishing industry to demonstrate, and be a good tourist attraction at that. The property that we own, the city owns, is off the water. Some of it's right next to the hotel, some of it's immediately across the street. And so that could be used for any number of things. Conference center is certainly one of them. And there could be some maritime related facilities as well. You know, we're looking also at doing, some work around innovation and entrepreneurship and concepts that would entail the construction of a building that would bring in maritime folks to an innovation center. That's a possibility. So we're open to a number of different possibilities. In the short run, people will probably see cars parked over there from the ferry, from the ferries. That would be a way to generate some revenue in the early going, but in the long run, we'd like to see, any one of those development scenarios take place.
So the majority of the property though would be under the control of Foss Marine, and that would be like a big flat looking parking lot that would be used for these very heavy wind blades and turbine components. It would be almost the same use as the South Terminal.
It's smaller, but it would complement the New Bedford Marine Commerce Terminal, and they've figured out a way. Andrew and Foss have figured out a way to move components down MacArthur Boulevard between the two. They'd have to do it in the dark of night when the traffic's there aren't too many people on the road because these things are big. But that's a possibility. The site also, the Foss site will also serve operations and maintenance purposes as well. So there'll be those operations and maintenance vessels.
Brendan's got the South Terminal up there, which is somewhat larger than this Foss Marine.
Right.
center would be. Now, some people, Your Honor, are remain very skeptical about offshore wind. It's sort of like the commuter rail coming from Boston. Even though commuter rail is being built now, there are still people who say it's not coming. It's a pipe dream. How do you respond to these people who are saying that, yeah, they may have made some progress on wind since Biden came into office, but it's just not going to happen? And
I guess the short answer is they won't be saying that come next year, because they'll see these massive components showing up on the waterfront, and so they'll see it, and seeing is believing. But it's what I'd say is that, look, there's an industry. It's not like this stuff is being invented in the United States. There are some 3,000 offshore wind turbines turning in the North Sea in Europe. It's been an industry that has been around for 30 years and is fully matured. Europe, the discussion about where Europe gets its energy has been on front page news for the last 6 weeks. And one of the answers to, that question, where's Europe get its energy, is one of the answers is offshore wind. That's a big part of it. Especially after a lot of those countries have gone off nuclear in the last few years. So, and that's all coming to the United States. I mean, there's a reason why some of these developers are spending a fortune to buy areas of seabed out in the middle of the Atlantic. And we saw just 2 weeks ago, one company bid $1 billion for one lease area off of New York, and it means that it's very valuable. They're not spending that money on speculation. They know that they can put these deals together, and it's going to happen, and it's just a matter of time.
And our own Anastasia Lennon had a story a few weeks ago about shipping these turbines through the hurricane barrier. I was surprised to learn that the wind has to be less than 15 knots in order for them to go through. I don't know how many days a year the wind is less than 15 knots in New Bedford, but
yeah. So I read that piece. I'm not sure that. Yeah, I have a different take on that piece. I'm not too concerned about. I'm not too concerned about elisions, which is a word I wasn't aware of before. An elision is like a collision, except one of the objects colliding is immovable. I'm not too concerned about elisions with the barrier. I'm more concerned about the fact that the Army Corps of Engineers doesn't have spare parts for the mechanism that opens and closes that barrier, and that those parts are custom made. That was the real story that was kind of buried, Jack, in her piece. It wasn't that.
Well, we always appreciate
the real concern is not collisions with the barrier.
Yeah, we always appreciate the constructive criticism. I will say that your own port director said that he's scared, I think was his words, not ours, of what it would mean if there was a major.
Yeah, he has a different take on the context in which he was quoted. We talked about that piece afterward.
Well, tell us what the difference is.
No, the difference is that I don't see. I'm not concerned about collisions with the barrier. I'm concerned about the parts inside the turning mechanisms of the barrier. That is, if there's something to keep me up at night, it's that. That's something that the federal government's going to have to fix. There are, and here's your next New Bedford Light story. The barrier has mechanisms that open and close the doors that are over 50 years old. They're custom made, and the Army Corps doesn't have spare parts on hand. So if one of those breaks, it will go down for a while. So if it goes down and the doors are open, then the city is prone to a storm surge. If it closes, breaks down the open position, then the vessels can't come and go, which is also a big deal. So that's something. I mean, that's the bigger deal here.
But that was in Anastasia's story, I believe.
That wasn't the story. It was made. There was passing reference to it, but that was the main thing.
Okay. Well,
I encourage your reporters to call us if they really want the context. See, to do exactly what you're doing right now, Jack, which is getting the.
I think it was a very good story, and we're not here to argue about that. Foss Maritime does all kinds of things besides just shipping big components. They do a lot of maintenance, marine transportation, towing. Are they are you envisioning them as someone who's going to do shipping, cargo shipping in general in the city?
They'll do what's called project cargo, which is, as the name implies, they'll ship components of larger projects, offshore wind in particular, to and from that site. They'll do a lot of that, but I think most of what they'll do is maintenance. They'll do some construction work out of there. There's a lot of construction work that has to happen, including on things that beyond just the turbines themselves. Like, for instance, like substations. For every wind farm, there'll be one or two substations that'll have to be built there on platforms out at sea. That's a big part of what a lot of these companies will do.
All right. So we're heading to the last 15 minutes. So we'll go to
Time's flying, Jack.
Yeah. It's a interesting discussion. So the last big economic development project on our plate here is the request for proposals. That's finally, after 2 or 3 years, I think, in development. There's a lot of ins and outs of that project. Going to be sent out if the city council approves next week. Is it next week or tomorrow?
I think it's tomorrow. I'll look at my calendar as you're talking.
Yeah. Anyway, the city council is their finance committee has already approved it, and this is to take 100 acres of the I think it's 280 acre golf course and make it into a business park. You're going to do requests for proposals, and this is envisioned by the city of bringing 1,000 jobs and a huge amount of revenue into New Bedford. Tell us what kind of a industrial park you're envisioning for that parcel.
Well, we want the emphasis to be on advanced manufacturing, right? So, we know we don't want the place to be filled up with, scrap tire dealers or, junkyards or anything like that. That's going to be prohibited by the zoning in place for this project. It is, we want to see higher paying jobs there. We want to see give people the opportunity to get, higher end manufacturing jobs like we have in other parts of the city at places like Titleist and others. But we know that the real estate market for such things in Eastern New England is really hot. We get calls, Derek Santos at the Economic Development Council gets calls from real estate brokers all the time asking, when is this thing going to go out? And so the major commercial real estate brokers and that operate in the Northeast are all very interested, and they're all going to be bidding against one another for the right to develop this site. So that's exciting. It's taken a long time to get to this point. Of course, there've been complications. It takes a while to get through the legislature. It took a while to get the thing back off track after there'd been a state Supreme Court decision that complicated the use of parkland, greatly complicated the use of what's characterized as parkland for industrial purposes. So, but it's on track now, and it's taken a lot of work, a lot of determination to move it forward. But that's what's necessary when you're trying to do a big project like this one. It's not a massive industrial park as industrial parks go, but it's a significant amount of land, and it's very marketable. It's by the intersection of two highways near an airport, next to a rail spur. There's no neighborhood on that side of the highway, so it's really attractive to companies that want to do business in this part of the state. So that's what we're trying to capitalize on, and it falls into a bigger picture. Like we want New Bedford. We want to utilize all the land we have. New Bedford is a land poor city. We're 24 square miles. Almost a quarter of that is wetland in the Acushnet Cedar Swamp. So we're pretty built out. There aren't a lot of other options to do this kind of work, and I'm glad the city council has gotten behind and supports it. And that meeting is tomorrow night, and we look forward to pressing on with that project.
Yeah, the host. I've just gotten a word that the next council meeting is April 12th. So
that's the next count, but the property committee meets tomorrow night.
The property committee.
Yeah.
The property committee has already. They had to go back to the department heads, I believe, in order.
Yeah, there's some arcane procedure they had to go through to just make sure that every department head didn't object to the sale of city-owned property. It's a provision that's been in the city code for God knows how long, but It's kind of unnecessary, but we're going through that process, and that'll be all set by tomorrow night.
So what makes you think that we can get advanced manufacturing and not be saddled with some low end, dirty, grimy manufacturing plant up there? What is the basis that you think that we can get?
Well, there's
This
certain uses that are
idea?
prohibited in the zoning, right? So, tire recycling, other recycling facilities, those are usually much lower wage. And it is, and we also know that there's tremendous demand for that kind of what's called greenfield manufacturing space. You've seen industrial parks in, Bridgewater, down the Cape, Taunton, all fill up in recent years because of that demand, and and we've seen it here. We've done some market studies that show as much, that this land, there's very little in the way of available space like this anywhere in eastern New England, and anywhere in New England. Anywhere in eastern New England, way out in western New England, yeah, there's some space like this, but not in urban areas and the urban areas of New England. So, I think we're pretty confident that there's going to be some robust bidding for that property.
Have you received any inquiries with all the talk about it the last 2 or 3 years?
From people who want to buy it, yeah, as I mentioned, the real estate brokers, all the major commercial real estate brokers in the Northeast, which are all national brokers, have inquired of Derek Santos, and he would tell you, if he were here, he'd tell you that they call on almost a weekly basis now.
That sort of thing happens through the brokers, not through the actual companies that would like to come.
Yeah, so that's usually how it works. A company, let's say a manufacturer, let's say it's a pharmaceutical company who wants to locate somewhere, they usually go through a commercial real estate broker. So this is essentially what people will see when this RP goes out, are bids submitted by major commercial real estate brokers, and those are the ones that place their clients, the operating companies, where they'd like to go.
So this park and Pleasantly Golf Course is located right at the juncture of 195 and 140. There's a lot of concerns in the abiding neighborhoods about traffic, and a lot of times you get these big developments, and then the traffic problems are experienced afterwards, and people say, "Oh, we didn't think of that. We didn't think that would happen." If you want a good example of it, you just have to drive to Fons Corner Road in North Dartmouth, where there frequently has been traffic problems in the past. Anyway, what's going to ensure that we get a good traffic pattern for these neighborhoods that are nearby?
Well, so first off, once we get a sense of what the development pattern will look like, we can do a traffic study and put in the mitigating measures that are necessary. So that'll be the traffic lights, and that'll be incumbent upon the developers to pay for it, but the traffic lights, lane extensions, and so forth, so to mitigate any additional volume. Yeah, the other thing to consider too is, for those of us who are old enough to remember what Hathaway Road used to be. Hathaway Road used to have Cinema 140 right down at the bottom, and Hathaway Road used to have Rosie's, which for a time I think it wasn't the highest grossing restaurant in Greater New Bedford. It was up there. It was a very popular place. There are a lot of people who traveled on Hathaway Road. It's actually road engineers would tell you is that it's actually a roadway that's under capacity, right? It's pretty wide, and people complain about cars speeding there, but they speed because there aren't too many other cars around. It's not so. We're pretty confident that stretch of roadway should be able to accommodate an increase in volume at this new site.
I'd be remiss for the golfers in the city if I didn't ask you about. I noticed that you've announced now that the course is going to remain an 18-hole course. I was looking at the land that's left out. Is that going to be a par 3 18-hole course, or
I think it's largely going to be intact. So you're removing basically the park will be built on 6 holes, And so you can see the 6 fairways right there. The people will recognize the first 3 holes right there, which you're circling, and then the other 3. So it'll be an exercise in adding 6 holes to what it already exists. And there's room to do that. There may be 1 or 2 holes that have to be turned into par 3s, but there's also room to construct some others. It'll take time. It'll be phased in. It'll start off as a 9+, right? And then it'll eventually go to 18, but that'll take some time to build out. But look, it's a good golf course. It's been around for a long time. It's not nearly as popular as it once was. It used to be a real big destination for folks, but now there are only, as we understand it, only 50 city residents that are full-time members there. And so it's not quite as popular as it once was, but it'll be preserved and it'll continue to function.
So have you had a golf architect look at it to give an opinion that you can fit the
Yep.
whole thing?
Yeah, we have we have really two different consultants that have looked at it and confirmed that it can be converted into an 18-hole course.
Yeah. We have a little bit of time left, so I'm going to ask a question that I kind of squeezed out because I was worried that we wouldn't get to everything, and that is jobs at these big developments. 1,000 jobs at the business park at the golf course, almost 900 at the North Terminal. I think it was something like 600 at the Foss Terminal. We had this agreement that was announced last fall on the Labor Council and the city that they were going to guarantee jobs, but we've never been able to get that agreement. Why can't we get that agreement? And what are the guarantees that these jobs are going to be local?
Well, the agreement that you're talking about is a project labor agreement between Vineyard Wind and the Southeastern Massachusetts Labor Council. So the city was not a party to that that agreement. So it's between 2 private actors, and so you can ask either one of them, but obviously they're subject to public record.
You want to recommend that they disclose it?
Obligations. But the gist of it, that is, I think it'd be good to share. Well, you should have grabbed a copy while you're at the press conference, Jack. It's just put them right on the spot. Can you fire off a copy for me?
Yeah. I don't think I was at that press conference, but
but in any case, yeah. So it basically requires it is a promise by Vineyard Wind to hire union labor on that project, which is a good thing. It's an opportunity for a few things, to get jobs in there that are solid wage jobs with good benefits and good work conditions, and at the same time, it opens up apprenticeship opportunities for folks. There aren't in there any resident requirements. There is no requirement that they hire New Bedford residents or anybody else. Our job here is to continue to press them on doing that. We want to make sure that our residents are aware of the job opportunities, that they're in the training opportunities, so they can take full advantage of them. And that's going to be a lot of hard work as this stuff starts to roll out. And so that's why the Workforce Investment Board, or Mass Hire Greater New Bedford, as it's now called, along with BCC, along with the New Bedford Ocean Cluster, are all going to have to pull people in, working with a number of community groups who've been working in this space for a long time. One example is Buddy Andrade, who's just has understood the opportunity that offshore wind presents and has been an evangelist of sorts for a lot of folks in the city, letting them know that they need to get themselves squared away and get themselves into these programs. But that's all going to start happening. And what I've told all the companies is that good corporate citizenship here in New Bedford means that people in New Bedford get a first look. It's not to say that you got to guarantee somebody a job. I'm not going to tell you who the most qualified person is, but you got to make sure that our residents are getting up to the plate.
But it is a very, it's very highly specialized work. I think I read in one of our stories that General Electric, the subcontractor, does all their training out in Schenectady, New York. So people have to go out for a year to Schenectady, New York, and then
For some of the jobs, yeah.
and then in order to work offshore, you have to have another year of working inshore somewhere in the country where there are wind farms. It just made me begin to think of, are these going to be local jobs or are they going to
Yeah,
be
not
highly
all,
specialized?
not all of them will be. And so therein lies, I think, the need for us to, to make sure that, these companies do not default to bringing people out of town when there are folks here who can do the same job. So some of those very specialized jobs that for which they've already trained people, yeah, it should be a surprise if they bring them in from elsewhere. But we want to get our people into those programs. We want to get people into the new programs that will be at Bristol Community College. And we want, for those jobs that don't require all those skills, they should be looking at our folks first. And they should be, and it's not just the hiring of people. We want them to procure goods and services here. So that means if they're bringing people in, they better stay at our hotels. They better be eating at our restaurants. They better be going to our hardware stores, et cetera. So that we're going to have to stay on top of that. And we've insisted on that, and we're going to have to be vigilant about it.
All right. Well, we've talked a lot of in-depth conversation about these three big mega projects. As I said when we opened, this is as big a big economic development projects that I've seen in the 20 plus years I've been in New Bedford, and they are exciting. I guess the proof will be in the pudding as to how much revenue they bring in, how many local jobs they supply, but it is exciting stuff, and we appreciate you giving us the whole hour to talk in depth about these things, Mayor Mitchell.
No, thanks for the opportunity, and stay tuned. We're going to continue to try to push for more. It's there's a lot of good stuff happening, and we're working relentlessly to create some more opportunities.
All right. Thank you very much. This has been Jack Spillane with the chat, an hour with Mayor Jon Mitchell of New Bedford about three big economic development projects.